Teams are out for the URC final, and obviously both coaches think they've picked the 23 that can lift the trophy, but only one of them's going to be right. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Okay, so in this one we're going to talk about the teams, and we're also going to talk about some stats as well from both of these teams over the period of the last season. We won't be talking about previous meetings or anything like that. I've already got under a preview of the final that covers all that stuff. So this one purely about the players that have been picked and the stats related to them as well. Okay, so we're going to start with the forwards for both teams. So the home team, Leinster, you've got Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan, Tom Clarkson as the front row. Then Joe McCarthy and James Ryan the second row. Got Ryan Baird, Josh van der Fleer and Jack Conan as the back row. Then for the Bulls, you got Jan Hendrik Wessels, Johan Grobler and Bilko Lowe as the front row. Second row is Kobus Wiese and JF van Heerden. The back row then Marco van Staden, Ruan Nochia and Marcel Coetzee. So no Cameron Hanekom for the Bulls, and that's going to be a massive miss. That guy has been absolutely fantastic this year. Obviously you have Leinster with players missing as well, but those injuries kind of picked up a few weeks ago, whereas Hanekom, he played in the semi-final. He was brilliant until he had to go off in that as well, and he's been a standout player for the Bulls all year, so he's definitely going to be a big miss, but it's still a quality back row. You can't deny that. But if we look at first of all, start with the front rows. So Porter, Sheehan and Tom Clarkson, decent front row, but Wessels, Grobler and Lowe last week against the Sharks Springboks front row absolutely had them all to rights, just destroying them in the scrum. And this Leinster front row are going to have to go some to get anything close to parity, I think, at scrum time. Leinster have been decent at the scrum at times, been poor as well in parts of the season as well. The Bulls has just been good all season, and in terms of stats, they may not be right up there as the number one scrum in the competition, and that's probably only a percentage or two away from being it. Honestly, they got to be in the top two. But in terms of a scrum that wins penalties, for me, they're absolutely number one in this competition. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously, you look at Leinster and you see Sheehan there. What he's going to give you around the park, is going to be very important for them as well. They want to keep him on as long as they can. But in fairness, Kelleher did well coming off the bench too in terms of carrying. Andrew Porter, I say it all the time, if the scrum is going well for Porter, he's going to be a threat at your breakdown and he's going to be good in the loose. If things are going badly for him in the scrum, you actually negate his contribution in open field as well. Tom Clarkson, a decent young guy, but this is going to be a massive test for him, against Wessels, and just the unit as well that the Bulls have. On the Bulls side, obviously three brilliant scrummagers, but also busy around the park. Grobler, really good in terms of, again, his contribution around the park, and also very, very like Sheehan, sitting at the back of that maul and then being able to spring off the back and get himself over the line. And I think, the Bulls actually have two really good hookers. You could start either of them easily. I think both of them are absolutely brilliant, and both of them like to get over that try line as well. So wouldn't be surprised if in this final we get at least 2 tries from hookers from either team. Like a total of 2 overall, but maybe more even. If they're feeling good, and if the forwards gonna have their way as well. Well, yeah, looks like a brilliant contest between these guys. You've got to give the edge, I think, in terms of certainly set piece to the Bulls. Lineout's going to be interesting. We'll talk about lineout, a little bit later on the stats, but certainly in scrum time, the Bulls, the better scrummaging team. As I said, Leinster, I think what Leinster want to do is get parity in that scrum. And, that's why they picked these guys. We have seen them, though, this season, especially kind of towards the middle of the season, where what they were doing was Porter actually started on the bench, and then they had Boyle, or back then as well, there was Healy there too. And they would start, and he would come off the bench after about 20 minutes or so, once kind of, everything had been settled with the referee. At the moment, the scrummages has been going well, but, against a unit like this, those issues can easily come back as well. And, as I said, Clarkson really going to get a bit of an examination in this as well. We're going to find out, what he's made of. But in fairness to him, he's probably scrummaged against this Bulls front row more than the other two in the front row, because he's been going down to South Africa on the tours, whereas they haven't. Then next, the second rows, you got Joe McCarthy and James Ryan versus Cobus Visa and JF Van Heerden. So again, not much to pick between them, honestly. Very good carriers on, Van Heerden really can kind of make those yards. Same kind of like McCarthy there as well. And then, in terms of work around the breakdown as well, like James Ryan does a lot of kind of unseen clean outs and stuff like that for Leinster. And, you see Visa and Van Heerden doing that as well for the Bulls. So again, it's going to be tight. I can see both teams disrupting the opposition's lineup as well in this one, because they have, apart from these guys in the second row, they've got plenty of jumping options in the back row as well. So it means they have that option to get up there and disrupt. And for me, especially when you're against teams like the Bulls, their maul is so fantastic. Like, we saw them mauling like for 15 or 20 meters or something, in that semi-final as well, that, it's so good that for me, you have to get up there and compete and try and cut it off at source. Leinster, their maul is not so good, and they often rely on the fact that Sheehan can get off the back of a maul that's standing still and still get over the line. So, and they have issues at setup as well. We've seen them giving away penalties where, the lifters go in behind the guy who's caught the ball, and then they're obstructing, so they give away a penalty. And that's trying to get that edge, because they know that their maul, maybe needs that at times to get a bit of go forward. So, maul, again, I think for the Bulls is going to definitely be a weapon. Leinster, I think their best route to stopping that is getting guys up in the air in the line-out and trying to cut it off there, because, they don't have somebody like a Byrne who can come through, like a Ty Byrne who can come through the middle and kind of disrupt. There are decent forwards there, but we don't see them as much as him, like getting in there. Maybe now and again they get a guy in there, but certainly not with the starting team. You could see it with, when the subs come on, maybe they'll do a bit there, but yeah, from the starting team, probably best to try and get up and disrupt. Then onto the back row then. So for Leinster, you got Ryan Baird, Joshua Van der Fleer, Jack Conan. Baird, much improved over the last few seasons, though. His all-around game has gotten so much better. He's not just a show pony that can run with the ball anymore. Van der Fleer, he missed the semi-final, so he's back now. Going to be interesting to see how he goes in this one. For me, he's been he was good earlier on in the season, and then his form kind of reflected Leinster form as well. It took a dip as a team took a dip as well. Sometimes quality player will be playing well even when the team isn't, but it wasn't the case with him. So let's see if he kind of rediscovers that form. Then Jack Conan, he's brilliant there at number 8, but I'm sure Leinster would love to have Doris there at 8 and then have him coming off the bench. I think that would be the ideal scenario for them, because Conan, in those last kind of 20-25 minutes when the game breaks up, he's got a great carrying game, and he's got a good offloading game, and not just talking about the fact that he offloads the ball, but he's always looking for where the support is to offload to, rather than just offloading to nobody. But still, it's a decent back row. But then you look at Van Staden, Norcia, and Coetzee as well. You got decent carriers in there. You've got a threat over the ball as well. And you've also, as I said, got options for jumping in the line out too. No Hanekom in there is a big miss for them. For me, even though in terms of world reputation, maybe Hanekom isn't at the level of Doris. For me, though, in terms of performance this season and being taken out of the team, I think it's kind of 50-50 with that. What Doris adds to Leinster, I think Hanekom this season has added pretty much the same amount to the Bulls. So it's even missing there, I think. So those are our forwards. Now let's have a look at the backs. So start with Leinster with half-backs, James Gibson-Park and Sam Prendergast. Then left wing, James Lowe. Centres, Geordie Barrett and Gary Ringrose, who returns to the team. Then right wing, Tommy O'Brien. And then full-back is Jimmy O'Brien. So still no Keenan for Leinster. Then for the Bulls, you got Ambrose Papier and Johan Hussen as the halfbacks. We got Sebastian de Klerk, who was fantastic in that semi-final on the left wing. Centres then Harold Vorster and David Creel. And right wing is Keenan Moody. And then fullback Willie LaRue. I thought LaRue didn't have his best game in the semi-final. Though he did still produce some moments of class, but by his high standards, I don't think it was as good. But he very rarely has two poor games. I wouldn't even call it poor. It's just by his standards. Two below his standard games, let's say. He doesn't have two below his standard games in a row generally. So I'm expecting him certainly to be on top form for this final. But if you have a look, so first of all, the halfbacks, Gibson Park, you know what you're going to get with him. Papier, very impressed with him in terms of just his awareness, for breaks and sniping and stuff like that, little kicks over the top, that kind of thing. Like he really has very good game awareness. I think out of the 10s, certainly Hussen is in the better form. Prendergast got a bit of an armchair ride in the semi-final and still had errors, dropping the ball, poor passes, and kicking from the tee. Absolutely atrocious. Honestly, if he kicks like that again and it's a tight game, Leinster lose. Hussen, very good passing game, and he nails his kicks generally. So if it comes down to a kicking contest between these two on the form of the semi-finals, then the Bulls are going to win it, I think. Then if we look at the wingers, so Lowe is one of those players where he kind of sometimes he'll be the guy who wins the game, and other times he'll have a poor game, and a lot of it kind of I think revolves around his kicking game. If he starts like kicking out on the full outside his 22 or kicking loosely, that kind of stuff, it really seems to have an effect on his game. So that's going to be interesting to see if Leinster can kind of get his kicking game going well for them. I think a decent kicking strategy by either team is going to be a big decider in this one. But himself and de Klerk both know their way to the try line, and they showed it recently, most recently by de Klerk, obviously. Then on the right wing, we've got Tommy O'Brien, who for me absolutely deserves his place in the team. He's, in terms of the players who come into the first team, as it were, in this season, he's absolutely been the standout for me. But he's he's not up against, because they're obviously on opposite wings, but yeah, the other right wing is Keenan Moody, and Keenan Moody, brilliant talent, and when Moody is is playing well because he'll come off his wing, he'll look for work, through the centres. He's very good at linking through those centres, making breaks up the middle, and then suddenly he's got options left and right, to put somebody in for an easy score under the post. And with players like him in that Bulls team, that Leinster scramble, which for the most part this season has been decent, kind of fell off up until kind of last week. But it's going to have to be at that level, I think, to stop someone like him from finishing. We see him so often breaking the line, whether it's out wide or through the middle, and just his awareness of where his support is and the sympathy generally he puts on his passes as well. It's almost a guaranteed try. Then we look at the centres. So we got Jordy Barrett and Gary Ringrose for Leinster. Ringrose coming back into the team. For me, I really like Gary Ringrose as a player, but I wanted to see the Barrett Osborne axis kind of get another go as well, because I thought they did well in the last game. I thought if they had a bit more game time together, maybe we'd see them better. Here, we'll see what happens with these guys in this one. And I wonder as well with Jordy Barrett, is he going to have to take over the kicking at some stage if Prendergast is having another nightmare? Because you look at the rest of the back line, there is maybe Jimmy O'Brien, or there aren't that many players who kick regularly, in the rest of the back line. And you can't really wait for somebody to come off the bench if you're going to keep Prendergast on for 60 odd minutes. But then Forster and Creel as well as a combination, have done really well. I think, Creel defensively, not both sides of the ball, the guy is a real threat at the breakdown. And then, when he, he's so good at getting over from close range as well. So that's definitely something that Leinster are going to have to look out for then. And we look at the fullbacks, Jimmy O'Brien, he's been one of those players who's been around the Leinster squad for a long time, has been kind of, he comes in to fill in for players, and now he's had a run in the team, no Keenan there. So it's a big one for himself and Tommy O'Brien, especially. I think, under those high balls, got to claim them, got to be clean, because the Bulls are really good, not just claiming scrappy kind of, balls that go to the deck or wherever, but turning those things into scores. So I think O'Brien, in terms of his defensive side of things, definitely going to have to be good in the air. And also then coming forward, we saw Keenan, recently, where one of those players who was actually playing well in a poor team, where he was coming into the line looking for work and getting himself on the score sheet as well. So Jimmy O'Brien's going to have to kind of make up for that loss as well. Then Willie LaRue, guy is an absolute magician. Crossfield kicks, brilliant. Just awareness, his range of passing as well. He's a real threat. And if you kick loosely to him and you allow him to run the ball back at you and give him options in terms of what he's going to do, he's going to, for the most part, going to pick the right option 9 times out of 10, and 9 times out of 10, it's they're going to make it deep into your territory, if not get a score out of it as well. So those are our starting teams. Now let's have a look at the bench, because we know the bench is going to have a massive impact on this game. It was going to be tight. So first of all, for Leinster, you got Kelleher, Boyle, Slimani, Snyman, and Deegan there as the forwards. So Kelleher, as I said, around the park, I think he's improved. The issue for him and for Sheehan is especially the line out. Gotta nail the line out. So if you're not doing that, you're preventing your team from having, especially for Leinster, having one of their best platforms to attack off. Jack Boyle, we've seen him be decent this year. We've also seen him struggling in the scrum at times as well. So against this Bulls replacement front row as well, he's going to have to kind of keep his side up. Then Rabah Slimani, for me, I said it a lot of times, the signing of the season for Leinster. He's been absolutely fantastic, and Leinster are going to have to, are going to need him to come on, maybe to actually shore the scrum up. If Clarkson has really been, struggling against the Bulls starting front row, so we'll see what happens there. Then Orgy Sneyman, always has impact off the bench. He loves an offload. He got 3 more in the semi-final to bring to we'll actually talk about his numbers later because it's down below in the stats, but it's a crazy number. Then Max Deegan as well, so no Scott Penny. Scott Penny obviously started the semi-final. He drops out of the 23. So Max Deegan, again, he's one of those players that if Doris was available, then Deegan would be kind of the unlucky man to miss out because you would have had Conan on the bench instead of him. But again, he's a decent player to be bringing off the bench. So it's not like poor quality, as it were, coming off the bench. I think that's decent from him. Then the backs. Well, actually, let's talk about the Bulls forwards first of all. Ak van der Merwe, maybe doesn't score as many tries as his brother, but still, has an eye for a try as well, and he does get over a fair bit as well. And wouldn't be surprised if he scores in this one. And then Shaq Venny, and Smith there, Morny Smith, has been in great form, recently, and probably, one of those players that's kind of would have been pushing to start the final as well. But, we saw kind of the Sharks getting more parity in the scrum when these guys come on. But for me, they're not that big of a step down from the starting guys. And, if Leinster think that, things are going to ease up in the scrum when these guys come on, they're going to be sadly mistaken, I think. Then we have Yanis Kirsten there as well. We got Nizam Carr and Zach Berger. So, we got a 6-2 split for them. And, all those guys like Kirsten, very impressed with this season. Zach Berger, a guy who can, carry really well and, does his core job brilliantly as well. So, impact from both teams as well coming on in the pack. And then on the backs, then you got Luke McGrath, brilliant servant to Leinster and kind of a steady guy to bring on, kind of similar to Ross Byrne coming on at 10 as well. If Leinster need to steady the ship, he's a decent guy there. For me, if he wasn't leaving at the end of the season, I would have started him. I wouldn't have even had Prendergast into 23. I would have gone Ross Byrne to start, and then I would have probably left Prendergast out of the 23 just because he's he's been so poor recently. And yes, I know he's a young guy and he has to learn or whatever, but for me, finals aren't a place to learn. Finals are where teams go to win trophies, and if a young guy can learn something from that as well, brilliant. But for me, it's not it's not the top priority, honestly. And for me, Frawley probably would have been my bench guy as well, because recently he's been probably in better form than Prendergast. And if he hadn't had a poor patch of form at the start of the season, maybe he would have been kind of pushing to start in this one. But we are where we are on that. And then Jamie Osborne, I think, unlucky to miss out on a start, and he should have really good impact off the bench. Then for the Bulls, you got Keegan Johannes coming on. That's a guy who, when you need him, is going to kick, get the kicks for you and potentially, get the game-winning kick as well in this game. Again, if it's tight. Then Devin Williams, always lively off the bench. So, it's hard to look at either of these 23s and pick out kind of weak links. Obviously some players are better than others, when you kind of match two teams up against each other. But, every one of these players have great strengths And, I think it's going to be a fantastic game. And then let's have a look at the refereeing team then. So we've got Andre Piardi is the referee. Timo is Matteo Liparini. And then the touch judges, Mike Adamson and Sam Grove White. And I'm honestly surprised that Holly Davison didn't get like a shout for this, maybe like as a touch judge or something, because I think she's definitely earned it. She's been one of the best, referees, over the past season. But okay, let's have a look at stats next. So starting with points, so Leinster scored 612 to 609 for the Bulls. So nothing to choose between them there. Tries 89 to 80, and over the season, like 9 tries isn't massive in terms of difference. It's one try every other game or something like that. So pretty much even on that as well. Points conceded then 256 to 361. So Leinster with a little bit of an edge, on that side of things. So, but again, defense other than the semi-final has been poor recently, so they've got to reach those levels again, especially with the scramble, for that to actually have any relevance. Then clean breaks 159 to 147, so Leinster just about taking that out. But for me, in terms of clean breaks converted into tries, I would certainly have the Bulls ahead of Leinster on that. So Leinster will, I think, have to make more clean breaks than the Bulls in order to kind of, if they're going to win this. Offloads then 237 to 183. And, so there's about, 50 odd between the teams, 54. But there's one player who has pretty much most of those for Leinster. So again, I think pretty even on that side. Tackle success, 78% for Leinster, 77% for the Bulls. So, two of the teams who are kind of lower down the list in terms of the overall URC in terms of tackle success. But in a final, if either team reaches those numbers, they'll actually be doing pretty well. If you get high 70s in a final, I think you're doing fairly well. If you get into the low 80s, it's been an excellent performance in a final where everything is on the line. Then onto set piece then, line-out success, 85% for Leinster, 87% for the Bulls. So the Bulls slightly edging that. And, Leinster did have issues in the line-out at times this year. Line-out's going to have to be near perfect, I think, because, again, it's one of the major platforms that Leinster attack off. Because of the way their attack works now, it's more based around set piece, whereas before they were more multi-phase, multi-options, tons of dummy runners, that kind of stuff. 2 or 3 options for the ball carrier, one either side, somebody out the back as well. But we don't really see that anymore from them. And it's more kind of, they go a few phases, and then if things aren't working out, they may go to the kicking game. So if you take away the line out, then you're definitely going to cause them issues. But I think the line out is going to be hugely competitive because both teams have, plenty of jumping options. And, in terms of the hookers, we've seen either set, like talking about all 4 hookers now, either set of hookers, we've seen them having issues with the line-out throws, and we've seen them being absolutely brilliant in the line-out as well. I've seen like both teams actually have this thing where at times they'll go over the back, and sometimes it's planned, but sometimes you can see absolutely not planned, and they lose the ball to the opposition where, it's maybe, miscommunication or mistiming with the jump or wherever it is, but the ball goes sailing over the back, and both teams actually do that. I'm not saying all the time, but certainly compared to other teams that do a bit more. Scrum success then, 89% for Leinster, decent. 95% from the Bulls, though, is fantastic. And again, the Bulls very rarely give away penalties on their own feed, and they often put the opposition under pressure no matter who's putting the ball in. And if their scrum goes the way it did against the Sharks, Leinster in absolute trouble. So Leinster will just want to kind of get parity there. I think turnovers won them 143 to 147. Again, very slim margins between them on that. And then turnovers lost 262 to 287. So Leinster slightly better on that side of things. But again, you look at those stats and you see that, both teams, they lose turnovers, almost like 2-1 against how many they win. So, more likely to actually concede turnovers than to win them. So whoever can actually get on top in the breakdown could definitely give their team an edge. And, Leinster don't like to put players into that breakdown, if they can, avoid it, because they like to have, lots of players in that line, whether it's in attack or in defence as well. So the Bulls certainly could, make some hay by actually going in there, targeting that breakdown, especially early on, because it generally takes this Leinster team, time to adapt to stuff like that. Sometimes they have to even wait until they get into half time. The coaches tell them, listen, you got to commit more guys to the breakdown, or this is what they're doing. We need you to do this or whatever, and stop them getting in so easily. So definitely could be an option for the Bulls there. On to players then. So leading point scorers, Ross Byrne was 78. Again, I think it speaks to Prendergast's performances that he's the guy with the most points. David Creel then with 94. The Bulls, the great thing about them is that they have himself and Houston, with potential for taking the kicks as well. So that's good in terms of if either one of them is having an off day, because in a final, you can't afford for your kicker to maybe miss, let's say, 3 of the first 4 kicks at goal, because by that stage, that could be a situation that you can't recover from. So, a couple of poor kicks and maybe switch to kicker. They have the option. Leinster don't really. Well, again, unless Barrett's going to be given the duties. Leading try scorers then, Jamie Osborne with 7. So again, why is the guy on the bench? I'd love to see him starting. Keenan Moody with 9 for the Bulls. We talked about, how much a threat that he carries. Then successful carries. Jimmy O'Brien with 61 for Leinster. Going to have to see lots of that from fullback in this game. And Cameron Hanekom with 65 for the Bulls. As I said, going to be a huge miss for them. Clean breaks then, Tommy O'Brien with 12 and Keenan Moody with 19. And, again, that threat that I talked about with Moody is, he breaks that line, and then it's not just the fact that he's able to break the line, it's the fact that he's so aware of what his options are that it's very hard to scramble against. But yeah, Tommy O'Brien again, as I said, really deserves his start in this final. Defenders beaten then Jimmy O'Brien with 31 and Cameron Hanekom with 39. Meters gained, Jamie Osborne 709 to Keenan Moody 734. So again, Bulls with the guy who makes the most meters on the field from the start. Leinster with their guy on the bench. Then offloads, R.G. Snyman with 43, and I knew he had 43 because he had 40 before the semi-final, and I knew he got 3 in the semi-final, so I knew his number was 43. But yeah, that's a crazy amount. But I will say, some of his offloads are not very effective. We've seen him basically just offloading by handle the ball to somebody else who's standing still, who then gets smashed. So, like, I had those 43. I wonder how many of them are actually, positive contributions to the team. I'd say honestly, probably about 30, but still you're talking about, a third or a quarter of them that are a bit iffy. Maybe you should have held onto the ball and let Leinster recycle, and try and get momentum that way. But then, yeah, Hanekom with 27 again, a massive, can overstate this miss for the Bulls as well. On to defence then, number of tackles, Scott Penny 152, again, a guy who misses out, and I would have loved to have seen him in that final because I think his performance this year definitely merited it. And then Johan Grobler with 153 for the Bulls. So he's going to tackle anything that moves, in that final. And, I think if there are instances where, Leinster are, putting pressure maybe on the Bulls line, you could see him chopping somebody down and allowing somebody else then to get over the top and, get latched on the ball and win a penalty. Going to be so important, I think, in the defence at times as well. In that final, then Turner was 1, then Tommy O'Brien with 9. And, Cameron Hanekom was 16. Again, fantastic numbers. And it's a real pity that we're missing seeing him in the final. Yes, I'm a Leinster fan, but I'm not the kind of fan that when I saw him get injured in the semi-final, I was thinking, oh, great, he's going to be out of the final. I was like, oh, no, he's not going to be in the final, because I've watched so many Bulls games this year, really enjoyed watching him playing, and I was looking forward to seeing him in the final. I don't know, and I don't know how to make this as clear as I can, but I tried to make it as clear as I can anyway. That for me, I'm a rugby fan, and I don't want to see Leinster going out and winning this title and the Bulls being absolutely terrible. Obviously don't want Leinster to be terrible either, but I don't want Leinster to win this game because the Bulls were poor. I want Leinster to win the game because they were slightly better than a really good Bulls team. That's my hope. And part of that is seeing the best players play for both teams. And that's why I really am going to miss Cameron Hanekom in this final as well. I think the guy's absolutely fantastic. And I think if he hadn't got injured, and hopefully he's not injured for too long, I'm not too sure what his injury situation is, but obviously missing the final is a big miss for him. But Springbok's got to be calling for that guy soon. He's just so good. I know, the Springboks have so crazy depth in terms of, well, in every position, but especially in the back row as well, that you would think, oh, well, it doesn't matter. They've got brilliant players in there, but put that guy in a Springbok jersey and put him against any team in the world and he's still going to shine. I think he's honestly that good a player. So hopefully he's not out for too long, and hopefully we see him back, whether it's for the Springboks or back for the Bulls next year, just tearing things up again. Okay, so that's our look at the teams and the stats. As I said, if you want other parts of the preview, I've already got another video on that as well, so go check that out on the channel. But I'll just say to whether you're a Leinster fan or a Bulls fan or a neutral, I just want to say I really hope you enjoy this final. That it's a game worthy of a final. I hope it is, because we've seen one thing that I didn't actually touch on is scorelines. Is that most of these finals for the URC have been tight scorelines, and that's gonna if it's a tight scoreline again, it's gonna be very interesting on that. But I hope it's a brilliant game, and I hope that whoever you support, win or lose, that you do actually enjoy the game. And I do hope that whether, and I'm talking about myself here, whether your team wins or loses, that, you can be as gracious in victory as in defeat as well. And I mean in a good way, not that you're kind of taking the piss whether your team wins or loses. But yeah, just hope, everyone enjoys the day, and let me know what you think down in the comments.